W Christmas gift? Question mark? Let me put it on for you guys real quick. All right. We're back on the mock draft simulator after taking around a 3 to a month or a month hiatus from doing these mock drafts. Obviously, they're going to increase in volume when the draft season rolls around. I'll probably up this to maybe a 2-week thing for mock drafts. But board has changed, not too much, but we're now seeing the teams that are gonna end up pretty much like the top 15. But as I'm trying to, maybe not make these mock drafts an hour, maybe length or shorten the brevity a little bit. If you guys want to learn more about these players, make sure you go watch my videos on my 2024 big board for the draft. Obviously, ranking and eventually will be grading these NFL prospects, and as well as starting a prospect breakdown series for the draft series that'll probably start either late June or early February is where I'm targeting my first breakdown, which will likely be either Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that if you're, interested in draft discussion and discourse, a little bit of film, stats, stuff like that. But let's get into this draft. So for the Bears, you have one of two routes you can take. You can either replace a bandage with another bandage, that being in Justin Fields with Caleb Williams. I don't think you change anything with making that quarterback change, or you can pretty much trade down, get more picks, and look towards getting better skill position players, getting better defensive players. Which is ultimately what I think they're going to do, because I think Carolina ends up as the number 1 overall pick. I don't think the Cardinals, I don't think the Panthers will win more games. So I'm definitely going to move this pick from the Commanders. I think I'll just force the trade. It doesn't matter how much they give up. Commanders will ultimately be desperate for a quarterback, I believe. I think Ron Rivera is gone. I think that Eric Bieniemy likely becomes head coach, and Sam Howell's been benched for the second week straight as I'm recording this. And by the way, I'm recording this on Friday after the Thursday Night Football game, but it doesn't impact the board, so that's here and no there. But I don't have to talk your heads off about Caleb Williams, Heisman winner, great player, but has a little bit of concerns maybe with some of his pocket presence, maybe with some of his decision-making ability, maybe, ejecting too fast out of the pocket, maybe looking off his first read and then just running, maybe not looking to a second read. But ultimately, Caleb Williams is a great player. I'm not going to go over him, too much. We all know about him. And then, obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. Everybody knows Marvin Harrison, Heisman finalist this year, best wide receiver in college football, won the Biletnikoff. 6'4", 205, body control, crazy, speed, good route running, especially a matured route runner for a 6'4" player. And, he's the best receiver in college football. I could see him definitely being taken as early as 2, especially because a lot of these teams on the board really need receiver, including the Bears, who would likely really love for Marvin Harrison Jr. to drop. But I mean, Marvin Harrison, I'm not going to talk your heads off about him either. So the Bears have another opportunity here. I guess I kind of traded down with the Commanders, because I think the Commanders are the team that will probably have the best chance of moving up to 1. Obviously, they're at 3. They can either, get Drake May or they can get Caleb Williams. And with Chicago at here, they'll probably trade down to another team that I really, really believe will want to take a quarterback. And I'll, again, force this trade. Doesn't matter how much they give up. I mean, if you're the Bears here, you could end up with 3-4 extra first-round picks if you trade down twice. Because this quarterback class is definitely coveted, and the wide receiver class, and the top 2 tackles. So the Bears really do have free reign here at number 1 to basically trade down whenever and wherever they want to get the players that they think will allow them to have the best value now and in the future. But for the Giants, Drake May will be the obvious pick. Daniel Jones, suffering from an ACL. He will not be back for the first half of the season, so you can immediately put in Drake May, or I guess if you want to sign Tyrod Taylor for another 1-year deal, have Drake May sit, and then start the second half. I think Daniel Jones is pretty much going to be opted out of this contract. I think that Brian Daboll stays at head coach. I don't see a reason why you would remove him, especially due to the injuries at quarterback they're facing. But Drake May, great accuracy, leads the FBS in big time throws, roughly 4'3", 230. Great on the ground as well. Great in the pocket. Drake May, second quarterback in this draft. And then for the Patriots, they could go one or two routes. I think that they're also another team that, the Giants jumped the Patriots ultimately in this mock draft. However, the Patriots are pretty much also in the market for quarterback, but if they aren't, if they're not fully in love with Jaden Daniels, obviously a Heisman winner, do I see Jaden Daniels going top 5? Possibly, but not very likely. Even though I really do like Jaden Daniels, I don't see a team like the Patriots, very wise organization. They've had a lot of experience not drafting quarterbacks. They're going to wait for their guy. They're going to try to make a value move in free agency if Bill Belichick is still with them. If he's not, I could definitely see the new general manager or new head coach of the Patriots wanting to move all the way up to 1. But we'll have to see what Robert Kraft, who has the ultimate say over that, does. But if not, I'm going to go with Joe Alt, my best tackle in the class. Pretty much a blue chip, in my opinion, at left tackle. He is the, I think, highest graded PFF tackle ever. I mean, pass blocking is great. He's got phenomenal technique. Great as a run blocker. NFL size, NFL strength. He's 6'7", 320 roughly. Joe Alt is pretty much our second team or two-time first team All-American. He's pretty much the best tackle in this class. There's no, I know a lot of people do love Olufasano. However, I have some question marks about him that I'll get to later, but I think Joe Alt pretty much the best tackle in this class. And then if you're Chicago, I think that this is a great opportunity to do one of two things. You can either get another tackle. You did get Darnell Wright last year, or you can get another elite skill position player. And that's going to be, I think what I'm going to end up taking is receiver basically here. Either Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. And I think there's going to end up being a really big debate. I think there's going to be a really big debate on who eventually will become the wide receiver 1 in this class. And if I were to, or not wide receiver 1, but wide receiver 2 in this class, if I were to give the upper hand to one player, I'd probably give it to Rome Odunze. I think roughly he's worth a top 10 pick. I think Malik Neighbors is as well. I think I'll have them both going within the top 10 here. But Rome Odunze, phenomenal player. He was, I want to say, second in FBS yards. Obviously 13 touchdowns, top 3 in yards per route run, great body control, great speed, great ability at the catch point. He's a true X as well, 6'3", 200 pounds. And if you're the Bears, add somebody outside of DJ Moore, maybe have Rome Odunze as your Z or your dagger player. That's a really good move, especially if you want to continue developing Justin Fields, and which I don't think that the Bears should take quarterback. I don't think Justin Fields is particularly the main issue with their scheme, with Luke Getsy at offensive coordinator for the Bears. And then for the Chargers, I think that they could go one or two routes, but I am going to take the. This is a very questionable which one. Which one do the Chargers really, really want? Do they want Malik Neighbors and value a slot hybrid receiver, or do they value more of a slot pass catching big tight end? And ultimately, I think that I'm just going to go with the fun move. In recent mock drafts, I've kind of struggled, fun mock drafts on the side where I really want Brock Bowers to go. I think he could go for a multitude of teams. I could ultimately see him falling out of the top 10 just due to positional value. But I think Brock Bowers is, and I especially look at him too highly as a prospect, pretty much not to take him as a top 10 pick. Love Brock Bowers. He can play in the slot. Really fast for a 6'4", 230 tight end. And, he's in that Kittle style. Or he's not that Kittle. He's in that Travis Kelce build of tight end. And then for the Titans, obviously, I would probably lean for them to take Oluwafisanu. They have one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. They drafted Peter Skronsky last year and ended up having to move him to guard. He was drafted as a left tackle, 11th overall. But Oluwafisanu, great play strength and great run blocking ability. However, I think that bigger defensive lineman, I could look at Ohio State JT Tuimoloau, kind of bullying him a little bit. He had 2 sacks in that game, only 1 registered to Oluwafisanu. But I think he had like 6 pressures allowed in that game. But again, first team All-American as well. And a guy who was accredited with 0 sacks, but I definitely know that's wrong, definitely according to film. And then you have the Bears up with their 8th overall pick, and I think this is an easy selection for them. I'm going to go with Leiatu Latu, which is my favorite defensive player in this draft class. Leiatu Latu is pretty much a complete pass rusher. In 2021, had a neck or back injury. I'm not sure which one. Missed that season. Then he came back in 2022 as a situational pass rusher, had 10 sacks. Came back this year, gained, I think, 10 pounds, and became a much better run blocker and was a 3-down edge rusher. Highest graded PFF edge guy at like 96.4, which is purely ridiculous. He was 3rd in the FBS in pressures, had 15 sacks, first team All-American. Leiatu Latu is my favorite defensive player in this draft class. And then for the New York Jets, I'm going to end up taking Malik Neighbors because I just think that they're going to either they take the best wide receiver on the board or they take the best tackle on the board. But I value Malik Neighbors as a better overall BPA, best player available, instead of Talesi Fuaga, who is more of the need. The Jets really do need both tackle positions pretty much after I think Mekhi Becton's going to leave in free agency. But I mean, Malik Neighbors was 2nd in Biletnikoff voting, only 1 vote short of, Marvin Harrison Jr. That really just shows how phenomenal this wide receiver class is. Excellent get off, great at the catch point. Again, great body control. Pretty much all these receivers. 93.3 PFF grade, led the FBS in yards per route run, led the FBS in receiving yards. Pretty much just a phenomenal player. And then obviously with the Falcons, they are 100% in the market for quarterback. And luckily, a lot of these teams I don't think are on that necessarily, other than the top 3 teams with the Commanders, the Giants, and the Patriots. I think those are desperate quarterback needy teams. But then the Falcons are another one of them outside of the top 10. But I don't know. There's 6 wins right now, maybe 7. I don't know if they'll be at slot 10. But obviously they need quarterback. Desmond Ridder didn't really work out. Taylor Heineke isn't a long-term option. Going to go with Jaden Daniels here, Heisman winner, 5,000 total yards, 50 touchdowns. Great arm, phenomenal on the ground, had over 1,000 yards there, 10 touchdowns on the ground, and then was the best deep ball thrower in the FBS. Phenomenal player. Also, he will be 23, but I don't think that's as much of a concern as guys like Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. Not a disgusting injury history. So I think Jaden Daniels is very easily a top 10 selection in this class. And then moving on to the Saints. I debated which, area I want them to go in. I think that offensive tackle is definitely in position for them, but they've already invested a ton into offensive tackle. Drafted Trevor Penning in the first round. Ryan Ramczyk is another first-round guy. They've invested a ton into that. I don't think that they're pretty much in position to take quarterback. Derek Carr's contract is too lengthy for them. So I'm going to end up taking my favorite interior defensive lineman for this class, or maybe my second favorite, in Jerzon Newton. Phenomenal pass rusher and run defender. I think he's top 3 in pass rusher win rate for a defensive lineman. He's top 3 in run defensive stops. He was the 2nd highest graded PFF interior defensive lineman, next to like Tavondre Sweat. Obviously 8 sacks, great pass rusher. Can pretty much play the 3 tech, 2-eye. He's not really a nose, but also another athletic interior defensive lineman. They drafted Brian Bresee, another really athletic interior defensive lineman last year. So they might double dip in this class. I just don't think that any other, edge, they don't really need that. And they kind of need more run defending outside of, linebackers. I think they're very solid with that. Moving on to Green Bay, I have them taking Taliesi Fuaga. They're going to lose David Bakhtiari over this offseason. He hasn't played in the last 3 years. And Taliesi Fuaga is my best run defender, 91.8 run block grade for PFF. Obviously, I think he is my best right tackle in this class, but they pretty much need Edgerrin Jenkins. I don't know if he'll move to the left side as a left tackle, but obviously losing David Bakhtiari, they need tackle. Take Taliesi Fuaga, best run blocker in the class. And then moving on, my mouse just disconnected. Moving on to the Raiders, I made the pick off camera, but Bo Nix, I have them going with quarterback pretty much no matter what, whether it's Michael Penix Jr., whether it's J.J. McCarthy, if he decides, he hasn't declared yet. But Bo Nix is, I think, the best option on the board. Obviously, he's an older quarterback. He has been in college football since 2019, maybe 2018, actually. I don't know which class he was part of, but third in the Heisman voting. He was second in a ton of important stats like passing yards. He was first in completion percentage with 77, 40 touchdowns, 3 interceptions with a 9.5 yards per attempt is very good. But obviously the age component will factor in. He'll be 29 by when his rookie contract is up. And other than that, I really don't have any gripes with Bo Nix. I think he's great on the ground. He's great through the air. Other than maybe he's only had 2 good years of college football experience with Dan Lanning. And obviously, great supporting cast around him at Oregon and great coaching as well. But for the Denver Broncos, I think they're also really in the market for quarterback. But, they just spent a ton of money on Russell Wilson, and he'll probably not be on the team next year because they're benching him pretty much for the rest of the season. But I would more lean towards one of 2 positions, either edge or wide receiver. But I think maybe it's a bit too early to take these wide receivers inside the top 15. I will end up taking edge right now. I'll take Dallas Turner. The Broncos, do they need a 3-down edge? I think they need more like a 3-down edge, and Dallas Turner will obviously be that for them. But they've got good guys like Nick Bonito and Baron Browning outside of the edge, but they've lost Frank Clark and the other guy who they benched pretty much. But Dallas Turner is my second best defender in this class pretty much in total. Great as a pass rusher. He had 10 sacks this year. 20.5 pass rush win rate. However, my gripe with him is run defending a little bit. As you can see, I'll show you right here. Run stop percentage is 4.2%. He did get better. He did get a bit better as a run defender from 2022, which was, I think, his issue. Bigger offensive linemen would push him a lot backfield because he's around 245. Probably 240 when the combine comes around, but great get off, good bend around the edge, good pass rush moves. He's pretty much a great pass rusher. And then with the Minnesota Vikings, this is, I think, pretty much their only route. Other than the Broncos, I think they can take other routes than quarterback. I think the Vikings pretty much need to take quarterback. And I think they're a very possible trade-up candidate as well. But Michael Penix Jr., obviously, he's a great quarterback. He was second in the Heisman voting. Great deep field ability. But obviously he has a lot of red flags with the injury history, 2 ACL tears, shoulder injury. He's 24. He'll be 24 when the draft rolls around, 29 when his rookie contract is up. He's a left-handed quarterback. Some coaches have bias against left-handers in the NFL, and then as well as the mobility. He's kind of a statue in the pocket, and he will kind of forego the check down to go to the deep ball. And it works at Washington, but that doesn't work all the time in the NFL, especially, the 2 high safeties, cover 3 arrow that we're kind of in the NFL. But, if the team is going to maximize somebody like that's potential, I think it's definitely Kevin O'Connell. Their offense has been productive with 4 backup quarterbacks. Maybe not productive. The interceptions will whirl a lot, but they get yards. They're a very productive offense. And Michael Penix Jr., that'll be the, Band-Aid on their situation as of now. If they want to continue to make the playoffs, which I think if they have a very solid quarterback, they probably could. And then this is the second Cardinals pick, and I'll probably end up going with edge rusher here. I think I'm going to end up taking cornerback here. And I kind of say that because I don't know if they even have a bunch of cornerbacks. I think Marco Wilson is their boundary cornerback. I know Marco Wilson's one of their boundary cornerbacks, and that's just really not a great idea. He's one of the worst PFF graded cornerbacks. And I think that's been one of their main issues. They allow a lot of yards through the air and a lot of touchdowns through the air, a lot of passing touchdowns allowed as well. And if you want to solve that, get a better secondary with Nate Wiggins and Jonathan Gannon. Obviously, they had a great secondary last year. They could either add edge rusher or cornerback. This is pretty much whichever one they want to. And I'll go with Nate Wiggins. He's a pure boundary cornerback, roughly 6'2", 200-something pounds. He had like a 40 passer rating allowed with 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown allowed. 10 games played, though, but great guy in coverage. He's got the size, too, and athleticism. That's pretty much a great pick for them. And then moving on to the Steelers, I think this is definitely 1 or 2 picks. This is either Kool-Aid McKinstry or this is Peyton Wilson out of North Carolina State, and it really depends on what they value. I think that they should go with cornerback, but I've obviously debated taking them going Peyton Wilson, who I talk a lot more in my draft board. I don't know whether I'll pick him here. Actually, I probably will. But yeah, Kool-Aid McKinstry, very athletic cornerback, good technique and good footwork. Not the strongest cornerback, definitely not a press guy, but he'll play great man. He'll play good zone, fast cornerback, good returner as well. And he had a solid year this year. I think he was he maybe was a first-team All-American or second-team All-American, but 70 passer rating allowed. Last year it was 57.9 in 800 defensive snaps, 400 cover snaps. That's very, very solid. And, I think Kool-Aid McKinstry, very good cornerback. And then moving on to the Bengals, I would take tackle all day. I think that they still have not figured out their issue. And I'll take J.C. Latham. Artemis Mims is also a great player. I'll take him later, but obviously injury kind of stunted his season here. But J.C. Latham is my second or first best right tackle in the class, 800 snaps there. 1 sack allowed, but 10 pressures, I think, which was top 3 among right tackles. Very solid player. I wouldn't say he's an elite pass blocker or an elite run defender or run blocker, but he's very solid in pretty much all areas as a tackle. And I think for the Bengals, you pretty much need anything you can get at tackle. I think they still have Jonah Williams. Even though he requested a trade, I think they still have him at right tackle, Orlando Brown at left tackle. But yeah, their situation is very questionable outside. I mean, with quarterback, it's fine, but they definitely tackle should be their only thing on their mind, and it seems that's been that way for the last 3 years since the Super Bowl, really. And then for the Buccaneers, I've debated taking a few positions here. The interior offensive line is pretty much their biggest need. But obviously there are none that are I'm not gonna take any interior offensive lineman within the 19th pick. I end up taking edge a lot for them. I'm gonna take Jared Verse, because I think they're pretty much fine on edge. They have Joe Tryon, whatever his other last name is, and then they have Shaq Barrett. Shaq Barrett's been injured a ton the last couple of years, but I'm very, very fine with them going with Jared Verse. 20.8 pass rush win rate, 90 pass rush grade, 11 sacks, was top 10 in pressures, was top, his true pass set, which is TPS, some PFF stat, basically ignoring all of the screens and abnormalities when it comes to pass rush win rate. He was top 3. But Jared Verse, great pass rusher, very technically sound, strong as well, bit of a bully defender, bit of a great edge setter. Like Jared Verse a lot there. And then for the Colts, I have them taking defensive back, pretty much cornerback all the way here. And I have them going with Cooper DeJean. I'll go with Cooper DeJean here. Like him a lot. He was, I don't know whether he was a first team All-American or second team, but he really, he's a great player. He'll get that white cornerback stigma in the NFL maybe, but I mean, he'll be 21 when the draft rolls around. He's very athletic, great punt returner, NFL size, especially for the boundary, 6'1", 207. And, maybe if your team, he might fall to the second round and end up as a safety, but, he does not play safety. He played in the box 23 times, played deep free safety 1 time. And I mean, his boundary, especially at a premier defensive team like Iowa, in the last 2 years, his passer rating has been under 50 both times, had 7 interceptions and only 2 touchdowns in pretty much 800 coverage snaps. And Kubadjian, I think he pretty much deserves an ability to play outside in the NFL. And I think for the Colts that allow a ton of yards through the air, they need a bit of boundary help. So that's a good pick there. And then for the Seattle Seahawks, this is an argument of 2 different styles of edge rusher. You got Chop Robinson, has got a great get off, great pass rush moves, great bend, or you have Braylon Trice, pretty much the grit and grind, edge setter, big, 4'3" on the hand in the dirt, edge setting, 6'5", 270 type of power rusher. And I think for the Seattle Seahawks, I think I'll take Chop Robinson for them, honestly, because I think they need more quick edge rushers. I know they have Boye Mafe, who's having a great year, but outside of that, they've got Dearness Jones, who is their, I don't know if they play 3-4 or 4-3, but he's their hand in the dirt outside defensive lineman. And I think with Chop Robinson, as I said, great get off, great bend off the edge, great pass rush ability. He had a 20.9% pass rush win rate, 92.3 pass rush grade. But then you look at, maybe on the stat sheet, he wasn't that efficient. 10 games, 300 defensive snaps, 3 sacks, only around 20-something pressures. But he's going to get a lot of hype as the draft comes around. And obviously that's seen by, PFF has them as their 3rd or 2nd edge rusher here. I like Chop Robinson. The only thing about me that kind of concerns me is his snap count. It really shows that he's a 2-down edge rusher, essentially as a, primary pass rusher. He does not have much run defending prowess. He's a bit of a lighter edge rusher, 250. It'll probably come down. Run stop at a 5.9%. I think he'll probably end up being a 1st down and a 3rd down, or a 2nd down or a 3rd down edge rusher within the NFL. But I mean, within the snaps that he gets, he'll probably make up for it in the volume of pressures he'll get at the NFL level. But Chop Robinson, if you don't know his name, you'll probably see him at the end of the 1st round. If you're really high on Chop Robinson and think he should go in the top 15, I don't think that's pretty much the case. But I think the hype will be mixed around him when the draft comes around. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think this is a great opportunity to take Braylon Trice, who I was literally just mentioning. I don't know his exact weight. It's around 274. I don't think it'll be 274 by when the combine rolls around. But pretty much a grit and grind guy. He had 6 sacks this year, but he was number 1 in FBS pressures with 70. But he's really grit and grind, power rusher, hand in the dirt. He's either a 3-4 defensive end, as in like a 4-eye, or he'll be a 5-tech in a 4-3 system with his hand in the ground. And I think for the Jaguars, you've got Josh Allen as your stand-up outside linebacker on the other side. You got Braylon Trice, who will be that, pretty much plug and play, find the weaker offensive lineman in play strength, and just push the offensive lineman back. That'll be his skill at the NFL level. A bit like Tyree Wilson last year, but Braylon Trice probably offers a bit more of get off and speed off the edge, unlike Tyree Wilson, whose probably biggest issue was his get off speed. Braylon Trice offers more than that. For the Los Angeles Rams, I have them going with Aaron Donald's eventual replacement for their nose, or for their 2-eye replacement, that being Tavondre Sweat out of Texas. I mean, he had a phenomenal year, highest graded run defender, 92.1, in college football, but also great pass rushing prowess, 15.2 pass rush win rate, 13.3 run stop rate, which was number 1 in the FBS, along with his defensive run grade. Massive player at 362. Reminds me a lot of Jordan Davis of that 2021 Georgia defense that made them so good. But I mean, T'Vondre Sweat, first team All-American. Maybe some of the stats like 2 sacks would maybe ward off people from thinking he's a first-round pick. T'Vondre Sweat is pretty much a first-round pick. And Aaron Donald's declining a bit. That premier Los Angeles Rams interior defensive line pressure rate has slowly dropped down. They more favor outside edge rushers getting sacks. But even if Aaron Donald stays for another year, you add T'Vondre Sweat. That's probably the best 2 interior defensive lineman group, maybe in the NFL. T'Vondre Sweat, phenomenal player. And then for the Buffalo Bills, I think this is easily not a desperation pick, but they really do need a wide receiver too. I think that's one of their main issues this year, trying to make Gabe Davis in their new system. But you really can't count on Gabe Davis a ton. He has, he's a 1 out of 4 game player. He's got a 100-yard game, and then he's got 3 where it's like 20 yards or less. They need a more consistent guy instead of Stephon Diggs, and he's been double-teamed a lot, bracketed. Teams running cover 2, the two high safeties against Josh Allen, forcing him to go on the ground a ton. That's where he's gotten the bulk of his touchdowns. I don't know if it's like 13 or 14, but 14 interceptions. He's forcing a lot of these balls. I think No, he's not. He doesn't lead the NFL. I think it's Sam Howell that leads the NFL. But there are 2 guys that I think that they could go with. You can go with either Troy Franklin or you can go with Dontez Walker that fits their scheme the best. And I think Dontez Walker, who really does have wide receiver 1 potential in the NFL, because the stats might not show it because he only played 8 games due to a college football transfer rule or eligibility rule. But in only 8 games, it's basically 700 yards and 7 touchdowns, 100 yards in 6 of those games. But one issue is man coverage, 56.6. Maybe not the greatest at fighting off press, even with his size at 6'2", 200 pounds. But great deep threat, great crossers, and great at the contested catch rate, 60% contested catch ability. Dontez Walker, I think, will have a ton of hype. In the latter half of the draft, I think he'll rise up wide receiver boards a ton. And then for the Chiefs, it's wide receiver all day. And I would really like them to take, a tried and true, X deep threat. I think they haven't had one since like Sammy Watkins. But Brian Thomas Jr. is 6'4", 205, but doesn't play like a true X. He's not the best blocker or the best, RPO type of X player like A.J. Brown people would think of. But I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. is a straight line deep threat. And, a guy that would be perfect for the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes has basically become a check down artist in the new way that they're trying to get wide receivers out in space. And they're trying to get Kadarius Toney or Sky Moore or, somebody out in space so that they can go for a long play. And how has that worked? It's not worked at all. Those guys are receivers who drop the ball a ton. That's their pretty much a negative with small receivers. But then you get Brian Thomas Jr., 6'4", deep threat, contested catch, great at the catch point, great as an end zone guy. He was first or second in the FBS in touchdowns with 15,000 yards. And, why don't we add that to the Chiefs? So you've got Rashee Rice, who is, that's the guy who you run on curl routes at the sticks, and then you have Brian Thomas Jr., who you send deep, but not the greatest route running prowess, though. Not the best in the middle of the field either. But Brian Thomas Jr. is pretty much a great deep threat for that Patrick Mahomes could utilize a ton. And then for the Dallas Cowboys, I'm going to go with a pretty outlandish but insanely fun pick here, and that's going to be Byron Murphy Jr. They drafted Mozzie Smith as an interior, as their run defender, who hasn't really worked out. But let's go with the fun move. Dallas Cowboys really rely on their pass rush a ton. They don't really need anybody in the secondary. I think wide receiver is definitely also on the board, depending on who they get in free agency. But Brian Murphy Jr. is a guy that I would lobby heavily for the first round this year. 20.1% pass rush win rate as an interior defensive lineman. And he's pretty much, he lines up in the B gap, aka a 3-tech, a 2-eye, and he lines up at the nose, even at the A gap, or the 1-tech as a 120 times this year. But I mean, and a run stop rate of 9.0, but the pass rusher win rate is genuinely insane for an interior defensive lineman. 6 sacks on the season. He was #1 interior defensive lineman pressures. Byron Murphy is a great option for an interior defensive lineman who you want to generate a ton of pressure. And for the Dallas Cowboys, you're already so good at doing that with Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence. Add pretty much the lacking ability of their team, which is run defense. Add Byron Murphy, who can do a bit of that, but more importantly, he can just destroy the interior of an offensive line. I think Byron Murphy, I'm going to lobby him a ton. I think he's a top 25 pick. Same thing with Tavondre Sweat. They have Texas really does have the best interior defensive lineman in the nation. That's a great pick for them. And then for the Houston Texans, I could have them going with a lot of moves. But I would go with a really fun pick. I would go with linebacker here. And I think that this is I think this could potentially be a very easy move for the Texans if they want to go draft Peyton Wilson, because you have DeMarco Ryan. He comes from the Shanahan tree, San Francisco 49ers. What do they have that no other team really does? And that's a linebacker that is pretty much, Fred Warner was a 3rd-round safety out of BYU, transferred to linebacker, and he's the best coverage linebacker in the NFL by far, on another level. And then you get Peyton Wilson. Peyton Wilson is a Mike style of linebacker, 6'4", roughly 238. I think that's what's his ranking. But obviously some injury history, age, he's 23. He's had 5 years. He's 2 big injuries. I think he's had 4 years of college football experience, but came in a bit older. But you got a guy who's just insane in coverage, 90.3 coverage grade. He's a guy who does not miss tackles, 4.7 missed tackle rate. He had a 47.2 passer rating allowed. I think he allowed the least receiving yards for any linebacker. He was named the college football defensive player of the year in college football. And then you go to the Texans, who, they do rely on their linebackers a lot, and they like guys like Blake Cashman are very solid in their roles. But you add a true Mike to that defense, who is great in coverage, great in run defense, does not miss tackles. He's very athletic too, and great in coverage. 3 interceptions, 0 touchdowns allowed. You add that to your defense, and DeMarco Ryan, he'll be very happy with that pick. For the Detroit Lions, I'm going to have them going with Terrion Arnold out of Alabama, the secondary boundary cornerback to Kool-Aid McKinstry, essentially. Started in the slot, but ended up as the boundary cornerback for them. Thing about Terrion Arnold is he's an interesting cornerback because he's a little bit unorthodox. He is young, obviously redshirt sophomore, only 2 years of experience. Decent size as a boundary cornerback, 6 foot, 196. But the thing about him is he does have 5 interceptions, 2 touchdowns allowed, 91.1 run defensive grade, 50.3 completion percentage allowed, decent coverage grade. But the thing about him is athleticism isn't as much on his side, and technique as well. Terrion Arnold, in the NFL especially, could definitely be up for a lot of big plays. But he'll be that either he's a Trayvon Diggs style, I would say, of cornerback, where he's a ball hawking guy, solid in the run game. I don't know how Trayvon Diggs is on the run game, but basically his style of cornerback will be solid in the run game, or plus cornerback in the run game. But he won't be the fastest or most athletic cornerback, especially on the boundary. I think he leans definitely more into the slot as an NFL guy. Due to the run defending ability. I don't know how on the combine he might run like a 4.4, like a low 4.4, or sorry, a high 4.4, maybe like a relative number of 4.46, 4.47 as a boundary guy, but he'll be solid in coverage. Maybe gives a little bit too much, slack when he's not a press guy. He really is not a press guy in the NFL level. I think even though he is more physical, he will be moved around potentially. But other than that, Chiriano, I think he fits best in the slot. And, the Lions, I think, do need more boundary help other than Cortland Sutton. They do have Brian Branch, who's playing phenomenal as a slot safety box role, but always can add to that. And then for the Dolphins, I think this is the toughest. Honestly, this has been the toughest pick for me all year. I don't know exactly who to go to, and I think I lean more towards safety. Deshaun Elliott is their other safety next to Javon Howard. And I mean, they're not going to be mad about bringing in another Miami guy in Carmen Kinchins, who is, a center fielder, free safety role. He's had 11 interceptions in the past 2 years. Obviously, they're not going to show it here, but 5 interceptions this year. He had 6 interceptions in 2022. Solid in coverage. A lot of pass deflections as well. I think he had 20 PBUs within the last 2 years as well. And then for the Dolphins, who are another team that kind of allow a lot of big plays down the sidelines, they could really add another center fielder to that mix. For the Eagles, I think that this is another team that really needs cornerback, but this is another team that also really does need linebacker. But, the scheme doesn't necessarily need it as much. I think wide receiver potentially is also on the board, but I would lean towards either safety, and I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. I've kind of drafted safety a lot for the Eagles. I know a lot of people in the comment section, because I've had this last 2 mock drafts that I've done, and especially in the one that I did in May. It's why would you draft safety, a non-premium position, for a team like the Eagles who, could add cornerback help, could add blah, blah, blah. I think cornerback definitely is on the board, but outside of the top 3 cornerbacks, I think after Cooper DeJean, I'm kind of like, these guys aren't really first-round people, in my opinion. Like Kamari Lassiter or like Denzel Burke, Kalen King, Josh Newton. Like, these guys are really like second-round guys, in my opinion. They're not elite guys. They might be in the NFL, of course, with development comes, but I would much rather value best player available. And in this terms, I would probably go with Kalen Bullock, because, another center fielder guy, great in coverage, forced incompletion rate at 15.9. He had 7 forced incompletions. I think his PBUs were like 10 or something. And another guy, he had 5 interceptions in 2022. Not as much this year, I think only 2, but played more of a, hybrid role as a box or as a deep safety kind of guy at USC, whose defense was really bad, but I don't think it was necessarily his fault. But if you're looking for anybody on the USC defense, I think Caleb Bullock has been the most consistent guy the last 2 years. And then for the San Francisco 49ers, I pretty much only have one thing for them, which is I think they need a true right tackle. They allow a ton of pressures off the right side, whether that's from the right guard or that's from the right tackle or whether that's from a blitz. They allow a ton of pressures from that side. And then Artemis Mims, he did miss some time with injury, but he was, he's been very solid in the last 2 years. With, in 2022, he only had 5 pressures allowed, 0 sacks, which is phenomenal. And then this year, his season was cut short, but he only had 3 pressures. I'm pretty sure plays as a primary right tackle. Didn't have that many snaps in 2022. This year, he was a full-time, but got with injury. But it says the 49ers are a great developing team, and I think he's the best talent at right tackle who you could just slide in there. If I were to give another selection, it might be, I don't know who's the best next right tackle. Probably Tyler Guyton. But I would rather them address their need or that need now, or they could go with a guy like Jackson Powers Johnson in the interior, maybe Christian Hayes. But that's pretty much too early for one of those guys. And then for the Baltimore Ravens, they don't really necessarily need anything on offense. And I think this could be an either-or pick. Rashad Bateman, I think, only has 1 year left on his contract, but he does have the 5th-year option. Odell Beckham Jr. is a 1-year guy. So I guess let's just keep on adding. Let's add to that wide receiver room with a guy like Troy Franklin. Troy Franklin was top 5 in the FBS in receiving yards, 14 touchdowns. great crossing routes, great crosser route ability, good speed, great deep threat. Out of Oregon was Bo Nix's #1 wide receiver, obviously, but not the strongest receiver, not the greatest at facing off press, but 6'3". He's obviously skinny. Looking at just him in the game, but that kind of doesn't matter. But works well as a dagger type of receiver. And you already got Bateman, who's kind of that route, and then you got Flowers. You'll have a small, but you'll have a really fast receiver core. So that's pretty much going to do it for this video. Let me know how you guys thought about this mock draft. Make sure you subscribe and make sure you follow my Twitter. Obviously, pretty much all my stuff's on there. And make sure you stay tuned for draft season. The channel's, my output will be a lot higher as I'll have a lot less on my plate. I'll have 4 classes this year at college, so I'll have a ton of time to post a ton of videos. But that's going to be it for this video. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe again, and I'll see you in the next one.